fully start this essay, I want to clarify a few things. This is chock full of spoilers for everything. There's a whole lot of review in the first half, which you can skip via the timestamps if you'd like, but it's just to make sure that if you haven't brushed up on the Prime Defenders recently, or if you were more focused on other characters, we're all up to date. As someone who's clearly very interested in these characters specifically, I don't want to assume everyone has the same level of knowledge. If you're a Just Roll With It fan but haven't watched Prime Defenders, please check out the first 5 episodes for free, linked in the description. And if you haven't heard of JRWI at all before, go check it out. If you haven't watched PD, this isn't the video for you. I really recommend checking it out on the Patreon or the website. I managed to finish it pretty quickly, and the $5 a month is totally worth it for all the content that's up there. Also, a lot of these connections in this essay are themes as a whole for Prime Defenders, but because of their closest to the players, are most obvious in Tide and Wavelength. So there's a certain amount of bias in the view of an audience member. Speaking of audience bias, no ship stuff. I know, I'm sorry, Tidal Wave Nation. I would really like to try to keep this essay as canon accurate as possible, and part of that means sticking to what Bisley has given us. That being said, go crazy with this as evidence. If nothing else, I'd be happy for your takeaway to be something weird and gay. If anyone wants to hear my thoughts about that part, let me know. But for now, I hope you like my interpretation of these two even without it.
You know, it's funny. Your name is Tide. I'll never turn down
Stroganoff.
And Mark's name is Wavelength. You guys are like...
Sure.
It's so ironic. Wave,
I don't think you know
tide.
what irony means.
Tide length. Wave.
I don't think that.
Hey,
I'm not sure I'm following.
He's a lizard man. You're from the ocean.
Well, lizards
live in the ocean.
Are generally actually desert creatures.
You guys could like be brothers.
I'm eyeing the time grenade to skip
I
this
don't think I
conversation.
could be brothers with that man.
Character foils are two characters in similar situations meant to highlight differences in each other. Although Mark and Tide's situations differ in many ways, they intentionally have a lot more parallels than you might think. To understand their experiences within the world of PD, we first need to understand how the Hero Society of Prime works, at least in the generalized sense. Heroes are effectively a branch of government, like glorified police who handle both on-world and extraterrestrial conflicts. But there is also a level of glamour. Heroism and heroes themselves are glorified like celebrities. It's unclear how many laws actually apply to heroes, or at least how well those laws are upheld. They aren't supposed to kill people. Some choose to have alter egos, and they need to follow orders from Watch, the hero government. These rules aren't always followed by elite heroes, though. And when it comes to glory and wealth, many quote-unquote good guys are more than willing to break these laws. Like in the Elementals one-shot Jax, just casually beheading people, but in Prime Defenders, Vincent being reprimanded for trying to kill villains.
I'm gonna kill her, so bye-bye. I'll sever the head.
Oh my god!
She's in several pieces.
Tide is one of the single strongest examples of moral failings in Hero Society. Tide is a clone, one of many, created exclusively to serve as a hero or die trying. He was created by Dr. Elijah Lambert, a scientist with Watch who worked closely with illegal experimentation rings run by Overlord, a supervillain and crime boss. Dr. Lambert was one of the many official scientists and doctors who was sponsored by Overlord, and Dr. Lambert's corruption doesn't end with just his complicity in these crimes.
And as you saw on Hardawa, he likes experimenting. Whether that be on people or whoever.
Sounds like there might be some history there.
Well, that is how I'm here.
Overlord's your father?
No, but my father was funded, I guess, for lack of a better word, by Overlord. And it seemed fine until it wasn't.
Clones are regarded as somewhat less than human by much of society, being compared to robots, seen as tools, and generally given the short end of the stick. They have no alter ego, no childhood, and live only to serve as heroes. If the average hero must hide their identity but protect their loved ones, then a hero with no ability to hide can't have loved ones, can't have a life. Tide specifically describes his life as having been incredibly lonely.
And the life of a hero is a lonely one. Lonelier than this.
He isn't the only one. not by a long shot. Tide was born as a part of the hero group the Elementals, clones each created from the same man but with a different elemental power, in Tide's case, water. They're all born roughly 25 years old with all the technical skills necessary to be a good hero, almost like programming. The Elementals disbanded a few years before PD started. Until this point, they lived together, worked together, and functioned like a cartoonishly perfect family of brothers, with Dr. Lambert as their dad? After a breakthrough in technology, Dr. Lambert figured out how to alter greater genes of the clone's genome, like sex. He created a female clone, Elle, with the ability to use all the elements, intending to make her the new leader of the Elementals. They sent her out on her first mission within hours of her creation. Something had gone wrong, though, and she went haywire. First knocking Tide unconscious, then fatally wounding his youngest brother, Shockwave, the electricity elemental. Other heroes stepped in and ended up killing her, and when Tide woke up, he had lost his two youngest siblings. He leaves the group following the incident, sparking conflict between the remaining brothers. Years later, during PD, it's implied Dr. Lambert was in some way brought to justice for his moral conduct in creating the Elementals, but not for working with Overlord. The Elementals each go their separate ways, and Tide continues working as a hero, but not all leave this experience with their morals intact. Mark lived like a normal guy, but born with powers, as far as we know. We know he had a wife and kid, but much of his life before villainy isn't clear. He seems to have a strong understanding of engineering, biology, and using his powers in general, so maybe he was a scientist? He has an organ in his lower back that creates electricity, which he taps into via needled ports installed in his lower spine and the base of his neck. He usually distributes this power into his equipment or uses it as raw electricity. In my mind, he probably used it for small things before being a villain, like that he drives a quote-unquote SUV Prius.
Good, you shouldn't take your fucking Prius to a supervillain anyways.
The full story is unclear, but at some point Ash, Mark's son, receives a demonic book of spells. No matter how hard they tried to destroy the book, or get rid of it, or keep it away from their son, the Winters family couldn't get it gone. One day, as Ash was playing with it, a large hand reached out from it and crushed his mother. Mark lost his wife, his son's ability to live normally, and his family's safety. In trying to protect Ash from prying heroes, they go on the run. Mark became a villain, eventually, and soon enough, Wavelength and Tide are bound nemesi? Enemies, even before Shockwave's death. So far, they've both been born with powers they didn't ask for, and have lost one family member to another, Mark's wife to Ash, and Shockwave to Elle. This loss has led them to different ends of the hero spectrum, but they've now met each other. A few months before PD starts, Tide is assigned to watch over a group of young heroes in training. They're teenagers, which Tide has no experience with, but he quickly sees himself as a pseudo-father figure and dedicates himself to their care. As a mentor, Tide is very concerned with their safety and encourages them to have fun in their off time. These values, though, do not align with Watch in the slightest. But Tide begins to care more about parenting them to be good heroes than to be the heroes Watch wants. When it comes down to it, Tide begins prioritizing this a bit too much. He lets them skip school,
you don't have to go to school, but please leave.
throw parties, and lies to Watch about what they're up to.
Right? Yeah, let's keep that between you and Tide.
They're becoming a great team, but taking risks and making dumb decisions, which Tide is enabling. One of Tide's brothers points out to the boys that he isn't teaching them to be serious, but to be kids.
They don't teach you anything, do they?
Oh no, it's pretty normal back where I'm from. People just kind of carry around giant
What
swords.
is Tide even doing at that base?
Tide has echoed the sentiment himself, eventually admitting that he only really ever wanted to let them to be kids, which he identifies as a failure to prepare them for the real hero/villain world.
Yes, I just wanted you all to be kids.
As both a villain and a single dad, Mark makes some iffy parenting decisions. He puts Ash in homeschool and leaves him home alone for long periods of time. When we meet Ash, we see that he doesn't call Wavelength his dad, just Mark. Ash grows to resent his father and becomes very independent. He wants to become a hero and knows his dad is up to something sketchy, but isn't sure what. Their relationship is disjointed, but Mark has managed to keep Ash's powers a secret. It's not clear how, but at one point Mark begins working on Hardware Island, where Overlord has one of his many human experimentation sites. At first, it seems Wavelength was hired as protection, but eventually we discover that Overlord was threatening Ash's safety should Mark not work for them. This was a way to get Mark on the island for a long period of time and submissive to whatever they need him to do, which works out very poorly for him. This sacrifice is how we find out Mark's sole motivation, Ash.
Look, I got a kid of my own. I'm not gonna go around and take out someone else's.
Within however long Mark works on Hardoa, he becomes one of the test subjects. Overlord has a very Spider-Man villain-esque goal and turns Mark into a half-lizard man on top of his existing powers. This gives him scales, heat vision, and is implied to be a pretty grueling process. We don't really know how much of a fight Mark put up to this, given the threat of Ash's safety, but we know he wasn't a willing participant. Mark goes out of his way to keep his lizard traits under wraps, literally, and after the fact seems pretty peeved about having them. He's upset enough that when the PD kidnaps him and holds him in their basement, he ends up deciding to work with them. After an attack leaves the PD without a home, without resources, and most importantly, without Tide, Mark sees a bunch of kids not unlike his own, in need of help, and just can't sit back and let it happen.
No, they got what
I
was
think
coming.
maybe that might end up putting you on our side.
Look, I'll help you get Tide back. You're gonna need it.
So Mark begins working with, not just helping, the PD. And at first, the reason why it's the PD specifically kind of feels like a plot hole. It makes sense that he needs help, and it makes sense that he would save them, but Mark lets them stay in his house. Overlord has a hit on his head, and Ash by proxy, but we know there are plenty of people that want Overlord gone he could try and team up with. These kids haven't shown Mark their reliability or trustworthiness, they're incredibly loyal to Watch, and are under constant surveillance. It doesn't become clear to us why he puts up with them until we find out Mark wants the PD to train Ash to be a hero. He goes out of his way to save Tide in just the 10th episode of the first season, using the book and risking Ash's safety in the process, because he trusts Tide to train Ash to be a good hero, not the hero Watch wants. Mark is also the one to explain to the boys that Tide is a clone. He shares it in a relatively empathetic manner, or at least in a way that doesn't seem entirely personal, and explains that Hero Society does not view Tide as human enough to be worth saving.
We handle this on our own. Because I know if it's up to them, they don't save Tide. They let him go. After all, he's just a clone.
Wait, what?
Hang on.
Oh, you didn't know?
Is it like metaphorical for like hero society?
Wait, you mean the guy in the principal's office was just like...
Well, that's Magma.
What? Magma? What?
You kids don't know much, do you?
No.
Hey, clone or
I
not,
don't tell shit.
clone or not, he taught us everything we know. He's the only reason we were able to even survive that.
The Prime Force would never let Tide die. You don't know what you're talking about.
Then where are they? Up
I'll
in
call
space?
This could imply that Mark does, but he backpedals pretty quickly into full anti-cloneness after this scene. When Tide is safe by Wavelength and the kids, he is immediately mad because he assumes Mark was the one that kidnapped him. Upon realizing this is false, Tide relaxes, but they continue bickering for the rest of the day. Specifically, Mark makes a lot of very pointed insults about Tide being a clone, in pretty stark contrast to his previous attitude about Tide's humanity.
Keep that thing away from me.
What?
You
What
referring to...
Tide?
Or the hamburger
Yeah.
helper.
Yeah, I'm talking about the clone.
This arc is not at all within Watch regulation, and Tide at this point realizes that the kidnapping and subsequent villain team-up are not things he can hide forever. He explains that he'll be honest about his failure to keep himself and the PD from needing assistance, but not sell out Mark's identity or place any blame on the boys. This isn't because of his upstanding moral beliefs or his trust in the system, but because he feels extremely guilty that the kids put themselves in danger to save him. Mark overhears this conversation and brings them a suggestion. He poses, wiping the last couple hours from Tide's memory, enough that he could tell Tide a different version of events that would lead to them still working with Mark, but releasing Tide of his guilt.
Well, if they want these little
Tide,
fish
they'll
to
throw
grow
him
into
away
some...
just like that piece of gum you're talking about. You think I talk about him strange? They're not gonna care. Here's what I say we do. I can take his memory, from the time he woke up. You bring him back to where the base was. Tell him he cooked the beef stroganoff a little too hot.
I want to insight check this because it's very convenient that he could take someone's memory, and Ty does not remember anything. 26. Give me something.
He can do this. He seems very... With an insight check, you're really only seeing if he's telling the truth or not. Like,
I want to know if he's being sus about it, though.
being sus? Right? No,
Like,
not really.
Does it seem like something else is going on?
He doesn't have memory anyways.
It doesn't seem like he's being sus. He's looking for a genuine solution right now.
Okay. All right.
They decline, and Mark never uses this ability unless absolutely necessary. And side note, this is illegal technology from Overlord that is used frequently by both sketchy heroes and villains. It becomes especially important throughout Season 2, where it's used on plenty of people, but it's implied that Tide specifically is receptive to memory erasure more than the average person. Through the rest of the season, the group works together to defeat Overlord, and we see Tide and Mark get to an almost friendly relationship. Mark gives Tide a nickname.
That's
No
what
offense.
Waterboy said.
Tide makes Mark babysit the kids. They exchange numbers. Tide trains Ash and uses watch resources on him. And the dynamic of the Winters family / PD becomes an interesting pseudo-familial bond, created mostly by the kids, that forces the two of them to help each other and get along. But in the end, having someone to rely on who isn't a believer in Watch's goals becomes extremely beneficial to both parties. At the end of Season 1, though, this team-up can only take them so far. They warn Watch in advance before their big fight with Overlord, and no one shows up. If you're watching this, you know how Season 1 ends. Ash ends up having to go all out on the book to save their lives, and loses himself in it. When the trickster possesses Ash, Mark is powerless to do anything, and as far as he knows, he might have just lost his son. It solidifies all his hate for Hero Society. No one came and helped Ash when he needed it like Mark did for the PD, and Ash lost everything Mark had tried so hard to protect. In this scene, everyone, including the heroes in training, loses trust in Watch once and for all, exactly like Mark was afraid of. Mark is arrested, and the next time we see him is at the start of Season 2 in the Supermax prison. He's waited here 10 months, hoping William would be able to give him news, but is losing faith in the PD's ability to get Ash back their way. When Mark breaks out, he's at his lowest, most desperate, and most dangerous. Between Seasons 1 and 2, Tide is depowered voluntarily. He sees it as a fitting end for a hero who couldn't use his powers to prevent tragedy or protect his loved ones, and in many ways, it hardly comes as a surprise. He never chose to be a hero, any more than Mark chose to get all scaly, and when we see him halfway through Season 2, he seems more at peace than ever. The boys were so afraid of losing Tide. We don't realize at first that depowerment doesn't destroy Tide's life. It gives him a chance to actually have one. Tide eventually explains this, but also shares that he still wants to be involved in the boys' lives, even if that means being involved in heroism again, as much as he can without powers. We get a scene of him teaching Will how to drive, something William consistently struggled with, and it really highlights both how badly the boys missed Tide's guidance and how fit for the role of parenting he really is. This being said, without powers, he still doesn't really fit into their lives the way he did before, and the boys aren't exactly the heroes he had wanted them to be. In the very finale, when Will, Dakota, and Vincent have finally gotten all the hero backup and information needed to take on the trickster, Mark is nowhere to be found, and Tide doesn't have the power to make a meaningful difference in the battle. The PD is without help of either of their mentors, or at least that's what it seems like for the first half.
You hear a crash, and the gold barrier around becomes visible for just a moment. As you can see, crashing in the arena is both Wavelength and Tide.
Tide?
Tide's here.
You can see as he is surfing atop a wave.
What?
Comes
Wait,
and
what?
splashes down
No!
to right
really?
in front of you,
No fucking way!
and a shield of water erupts,
Papa!
and he blocks. He rolls a natural motherfucking 20.
What the fuck?
I'm so serious. The water is held up, and the fist crashes into him. You see, the barrier reforms as Flo pulls it right back immediately. And he goes, "Sorry I'm late."
Bro, what
Holy
the
shit.
fuck?
This fucking gross ass pigeon flies over and just like gives him a hug.
Wavelength lands down next to him.
Oh my god, I can't.
Yeah, we worked something out.
How the hell? You had to explain that later. How did you? He was depowered.
I had a little help, and I knew you needed some too.
Mark is late, very late, because he's repowering Tide. The story is a little fuzzy, but the two of them find a way to illegally repower Tide. I know, Tide breaking the law? More likely than you'd think. When they show up as a team. Tide is repowered by choice, a choice he wouldn't have had without Wavelength's help, and Mark is ready to work with him via the only thing they can agree on: parenting. Somehow, through all this, a reject hero and a villain on the side of the most convenient good come into the battle together. Mechanically, they share a turn. That's how much teamwork we've got going on. When we compared this scene to the few other scenes we've had with both of them, the growth really shines. Here, the labels of hero and villain don't matter at all. The important thing is their shared goal. They work together in a way unique to the two of them. No one else can really understand being the result of Overlord's experience the way these two can for each other. Had anyone else repowered Tide, it would have had to be someone who was associated with his creation, someone like Dr. Lambert. But Mark has both the personal experience and the scientific knowledge to repower Tide from a position of understanding and capability. In my opinion, this solution in the finale is the perfect culmination of the overlap in these characters. Their goals, their struggles. We could argue coincidence for everything of these characters but this scene. So why think any deeper? We know they have similar backgrounds, that they work together for similar reasons, but what else is there to talk about? Now that I have all the context in front of us, I can draw some connections and fill in some details that aren't so easily argued. It's easy to say that Tide and Wavelength don't get along, have very little in common, or that their characters are better explained in relation to the PCs, but this dynamic changes greatly over the course of the 2 seasons, often in a way that directly relates to the other. When we really get into the meat and potatoes of PD, we find that the parallels between Mark and Tide make for a very, very interesting dynamic, in which they bicker like they hate each other whilst consistently also choosing to help and rely on each other. This makes sense because of the way they both interact with Hero Society. Tide feels strongly about the moral failings of heroes, as does Mark, and they find common ground in being able to rely on each other as stable outside of the rocky, cheap reliability of Wash, which someone like Tide has never gotten to get away from.
I don't know if it's that I don't want to try, but I've been a hero my whole life. My whole life. I was created to be a hero. I've never been just me.
So, actual topics, finally. This is the fun speculative part. No more review. How does all of this form their relationship to each other? In the non-literal sense, what connects Tide and Mark's whole stories boils down to guilt. Guilt for abiding in a twisted system. Guilt for not being able to save their loved ones. Guilt for being bad parents. Guilt for working together. It's ingrained in all their actions, but will become more and more present as I explain. The way Tide and Mark connect as victims of sketchy hero science is probably one of the weirder ones to grasp, but it informs our understanding of how they interact with each other the best. Tide is a hero clone. At the start of PD, he lives and breathes to serve Watch. Mark is a villain, and one of Overlord's test subjects, and hates everything about both of those labels.
Sign up to work with a villain.
Hey, I
didn't have a
prefer
say in
the
this.
term opportunist.
We never really get to see how Tide feels about being a clone, or at least he doesn't say anything direct. But when it's necessary, he returns to the Hall of Elements. And when he loses his powers and has better come to understand his unethical creation, he goes back to Hardo Island. He returns to the places most closely related to these incidents. At first, you could argue out of familiarity, But Hardawa Island was never more than a battleground to Tide. A battleground that once housed his sorta nemesis and is full of creatures that never should have existed, kinda like him. It's on Hardawa Island that we get the closest read on how Tide feels about his life as a clone/hero. The loneliness, the dehumanizing usefulness, the lack of freedom, but accompanied with a hope. He hopes the system will change, that if his boys can't leave, they could make a difference. He hopes nothing like his creation or his sister or the events on Hardawa and its twin islands will ever be repeated. He doesn't seem to be horribly nihilistic. If anything, he believes greatly in the PD, but also thinks pretty poorly of Watch's morals and ability to protect its heroes.
Want to be a hero, you should be a hero. And you are more than capable. I've done a lot of thinking here. There's not much else to do. I don't know. I guess I hoped maybe I could convince you all to not carry that weight anymore.
Tide's loss of his autonomy, or rather, that he never had it in the first place, is more like a stain than a tear on his life. He wants to wash it off, to start fresh, to turn Hardawa into a home. However difficult it might be, he hopes life is easier on his boys than it was on him, and that he can give them somewhere to be safe and valued outside of just being a hero.
I know that's unlikely. You all, in your own ways, are drawn to it. I want happiness. For all of you.
Mark's relationship with control is weird and sad. Mark feels that he's been forced by a cruel system to become a villain. He feels that he's had no other choice, that unless you're born good and naive like Tide, you need to cut corners to survive. And even then, look where that got Waterboy. Mark's struggle feels very reflective of poverty to me. He makes a few bad decisions to keep afloat, he gets caught. To stay out of trouble, he makes more, he's mixed up in bad stuff, and before he knows it, he's beating a beloved hero half to death. The black hole of villainy is inescapable for a man like Mark, or at least that's how he experiences it, and he wants more for his son, but can't hope he'll ever find a way out. Again, sound familiar at all?
I don't want Ash to end up like me.
In the physical sense, this is reflected in his scales. They're all over him, on his face, on his arms, and he tries to cover it up. He wraps them in bandages and wears a mask, but is stuck with them. It wasn't his choice. He was backed between a rock and a hard place, choosing between Ash's safety and his autonomy, much like he does when he becomes a villain. He chooses to protect Ash. In a very literal sense, he allows his image to change to something more and more evil, more sinister in protecting what he values most. Whether it's his public image, or his reflection, or how his son views him, he can't seem to crawl out of the hole he's digging. So, the way Mark treats Tide is very telling. Like I mentioned before, he's incredibly aware of Tide's struggles as a clone. He flaunts it in Tide's face. He calls him the clone. He insults him about it. He does anything he can to remind Tide of his origins. From his point of view, Tide is a victim of a culture he is still working to protect. In Mark's mind, Tide is naive and should be just as angry and scared as he is. Because that's what it is. Fear, anger, shame. Mark is angry at the world and scared for Ash and ashamed to be what he is. No matter how much he insists he isn't a villain, he never calls himself good.
I just believe in not dying.
He never seems proud to protect his son, just guilty and ashamed. So he projects this onto Tide, because Tide is an easy target, and Mark could convince himself Tide is the only person who is as easily discarded by society as he is. Just here, we've already identified the things that determine their relationship with their kids. Tide is so worried of minimizing the boys to their lives as heroes, because that's all he's ever been. Mark has effectively stripped a lot of Ash's control by trying to establish his own. Both of these things backfire on themselves and their kids, but by looking a little deeper into how they interact with each other, it's easier to see. So, they both have a complicated relationship with Watch. Through this resentment, we can still see a desire for change. They both want the system to get better, and hope that by raising good, honest heroes, they can help in this change. It's unclear whether Mark truly believes Hero Society can be saved, but we know he wants it to, for Ash. He doesn't just want he doesn't just want Ash to give up, he wants him to be safe, and when he realizes that he can't prevent him from existing in a dangerous world, he has to try to make the world safer. This is exactly how Mark ends up on the side of heroes. When your goal suddenly becomes to protect, you start aligning with the people who literally have defend in their name. On Tide's end, he knows the watch he was made to serve is not the one that exists, so he prioritizes himself and the boys. He acts first on changing his ideals, then tries to help the PD, and eventually also learns to accept they aren't ever going to give up on this cause. So he re-enters the fight. He gets Wavelength's help, really putting out there the fact that they're on their side now, and with Dakota and Miss G's help too, is a hero again. Tide and Mark's team up in the finale is what really sells this disconnect from classic hero-villain standards. They find a mutual home in the grayscale we know and love on PD, not quite villains, but not quite heroes, on the side of protecting their kids, building a life for themselves, and trying to help people where they can. Familial loss and grief are both strong motivators for the two, especially in how they treat their loved ones. They both have reacted by becoming very protective and afraid for their kids' safety, but express it in different ways. Mark is trying to make Ash as prepared as possible, teaching him independence and survival in the only way he knows how, the way a villain would teach it. He wants Ash to be better than he is, but as someone who has been consistently at odds with heroes and knows the gritty truth of Hero Society, more than anything, he wants Ash to pursue his dreams in a way that also protects his autonomy and safety. Ash wants so badly to prove himself to his dad. I've mentioned before that Ash and Mark are incredibly distant, a problem of Mark's own creation that he treats more like a minor inconvenience. He says over and over again that no matter how far apart it drives their relationship, he'll do whatever it takes for their survival. However unsuccessful this trade-off ends up being, that was his intention. Safety, success in the system, over their relationship. Tide's parenting style is pretty different. They both have incredibly ambitious kids, but Tide kinda hopes they'll give up, or not exactly. He hopes that they'll never have to struggle through the loneliness of being a hero, or lose themselves to watch his goals, or get hurt, or outgrow him, and the way he thinks this is best achieved by taking a lesser role in heroism. This route isn't realistic for the boys, or Tide. He truthfully doesn't know how to protect them, or care for them, or function like a real family. His understanding is stunted by his relationship with the elementals, his desperate fear of loss, and his growing understanding of the hero system.
I understand you're eager to engage in this hero life.
I just want to...
You have proven yourself to be quite the hero. I need you to understand that you deserve to be a kid too. Dakota, you're young. You have something here that most don't get. I myself never got.
When depowered, Tide suddenly gets a feeling of freedom he hasn't had before, which he tries to project onto the boys, not realizing that they're just as bound to heroism as he once was. He wants them to be free when they're just starting to realize they aren't. Both of these attitudes, however different, come from the same place. They've lost people they've loved to violent deaths they couldn't prevent, and Mark and Tide both see this violent cycle of hero-villain society as inescapable and fatal, and often necessary for them, but not something they want for their kids. They care so much and are so full of fear, and it's a hole they dig alongside each other. Mark and Tide are both rescinding their support in attempts to drive them away from danger, but are instead throwing them in the deep end unsupervised. Dakota tells Mark at one point, "All you needed to do was help and be a good dad." The two things Tide and Mark find themselves constantly at odds with.
Are you gonna show me that you're gonna be a good fucking dad when he's saved? Or are you gonna be another criminal and another villain that only lives for his goddamn self?
They can't put these kids in danger and still be good parents. They can't try to keep them safe and still be good parents. and they end up failing at both. Mark loses Ash for the first time when he becomes a villain, and the second when Ash is possessed by the trickster. Tide, in a moment of guilt and fear, is depowered and removed from their guardianship. When they reunite, Tide has made a large effort to make them a home that isn't fit for their life anymore. And the extent of the PD's moral struggles without Watch as a compass comes back to bite him. Ultimately, it's not until they both set aside their roles as heroes and villains and people terrified of loss that they can become supportive parents, until they work together in the same team-up that aligns them outside of Hero Society. If we cut back a little earlier, there's a moment in Season 1, around episode 21, where they have to choose between helping Tide and helping Mark. Tide wants to bring them to meet his brother Whirlwind, and Mark to find an ally against Overlord. I mention this scene because in the finale of PD, at the end of Season 2, they don't have to choose anymore. Everything I've explained, from weird science to festering guilt, ultimately is why they end up making such a good team in the finale. When Mark repowers Tide, and the two of them come through in this last moment to help the PD defeat the trickster, it shows that it was never about sides or politics, but people, family. The thing that ultimately fuels both Tide and Mark was never a duty or a call to justice, but family.
You three have reminded me what it is to have a family. I don't know how long I'll be gone, but I will miss you. Thank you.
The real parallel in these characters, what makes them foils, isn't just their flaws and brutal backstories, but what they fight to protect. For Mark, it's his son. For Tide, it's his heroes in training. When the two of them team up under this goal, there's no more fear or shame, but a mutual understanding that they're there to save their kids. That every other time they fail to protect them doesn't matter right now. What matters is that they're here. And you could argue they're only here now out of guilt or because they've screwed up so bad, but now that guilt is shared. They're rooted in similar tragedies and respond to them differently, but their stories start and end in the same place. Mark and Tide are great foils, amazingly written, and clearly have left their mark on my psyche and the minds of many others. The final scenes that really solidify this are two of the last in the show. When the two of them show up at Tony's Pizza, they're there for the kids. And when their kids leave to fight LaFrog, they stay behind at the restaurant together. Tide, now convinced he's in hiding.
Wait, okay.
And they're coming for me.
And Mark, overcome with relief that his son is back, they're on equal ground.
At Tony's, there's no such thing as criminals. So, like, they can't even... This is, like, neutral territory. They can't arrest you.
And after everything that has happened, can't deny that they're friends now, or at least something adjacent.
Just text Tide to make sure him and his alone time with Mark is going okay. Sorry that we ditched them. We got the pizza. Package secured.
He sends you a text in Morse code.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
It just says be safe, but it's like, you can tell that it says be safe, but it's wrong.
The second scene is brief, but very important. Finally, after all of this mess, Tide and Mark get to do something so normal as helping the kids move into their dorm rooms, sending them off to college. Often a sort of leaving the nest step for parents is so impactful for two characters who've spent so long defined by their need to protect their kids from world-ending tragedy.
Of Mark Winters walking into a dormitory, setting down a box. Ash walking in shortly behind. You sure about this one?
Yeah. I think so.
They get to be emotional about a normal milestone and not baby's first hostage. Their worries, their internal struggles. This moment marks the end of Tide and Mark as battle-torn parents struggling to balance the hero world and parenting powerful kids, and into a chapter of sitting back and anxiously watching them become adults. They can hope they have prepared them properly, and they can try and help when they have the chance, but honestly, I just hope if we ever get Season 3 that they're holding steady to all this character development, and if we're lucky, maybe helping each other manage. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this, please let me know, and if I've gotten anything wrong or you want clarifications, leave a comment. I'm really, really excited to hear other interpretations and feedback, even if you disagree. There'll be some other stuff you can check out in the description and a link to the text if you'd like to read this without video. Any clips used have timestamps linked in the doc, and if there's any memes you want the source of, I'd be happy to send them. Special thanks to Nat Planetary for proofreading and the Tidal Wave Discord for cheering me on while I work on this. If you do want to talk to me about them in a weird and or gay way, hit me up on Twitter or check out the Discord.